Hi there and welcome to our stream today. My name's Jack and I'll be taking you through working with Harrison LiveTrax with dLive and Avantis. We'll be concentrating with Avantis predominantly in this stream, but everything we're going to learn today is just as valid on both dLive and Avantis. Let's see if anyone is here with me in the chat. We've got a few people coming in. Jumpy says, sound please, can you hear me okay? Hopefully you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me all right. Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Well, hi and welcome. So today we will be concentrating on how to use Harrison's LiveTrax with dLive and Avantis. We're going to go through how you set it up and what some of these special features that are that's baked into the product for use with Allen&Heath consoles. So Harrison is a sister company. They are part of the wider Audiotonics group, but this isn't a product made by Allen&Heath. So this is just a little demo on how certain extra functions that have been put in for our products work. You're more than welcome to contact Harrison, have a look at some of their content for more information on things you can do with the product. So I can see a few people coming in. Ian says, hi, how are you today? I'm really well, Ian. Thank you for asking. A few other people saying hello. Hi to Chris, hi to Dan. See Jerry Lopez is here with us. Hello, everyone. Okay, so let's get started. So I've got an Avantis here next to me, and I've got some audio going into it, into the S-Link port. And I've also got a laptop here. So let's see if I can share the screen. So you should be able to see my laptop screen here. The very first thing we're going to do, is get our Midi connection up and running. So even before we open LiveTrax, some of the functionality that we have baked in for A&H products uses the Midi connection. We'll have a look at what that functionality is in just a second, but the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and open up the Allen&Heath Midi control app. And you'll see I've got this little icon that's appeared in the bar at the top there. I'm going to show preferences. This is just connected straight away because I was using it earlier, but let's pretend it wasn't already set up. I would go ahead and choose my console from the drop down. So in this case, it's Avantis. I'm going to choose Midi through TCP/IP, and on the drop down, I can see that I've got my Avantis Solo here. And I'm going to press connect, and I've got my connected information there. And if let me bring in the Avantis as well. So as I move the controls on the Avantis, can you see I've got this little box flashing here, and that little box shows us that there is connectivity between the Avantis and the laptop over Midi. So we're sending Midi information between the console and the laptop. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up Trax. So I'm going to type in Trax. Now, this can be downloaded from the Harrison website. So if you want to play along at home, by all means, go and download LiveTrax from the Harrison website. And we'll give that a moment to open up. I am asking quite a lot of this laptop at the moment. It's streaming, it's doing Dante, it's doing all sorts of things, and it's not particularly modern. So do forgive the laptop. So the first page that opens up, we can see we've got some options here. We can look at recent projects. I can go ahead and open a new project. So in this case, I'm going to open up a recording session. I'm going to press open. And I can set up my audio device. Now, in this case, I'm using a Dante card to connect to the Avantis, and I've got the network bridge switched on. So I've got both Midi and Dante coming down the single Cat5 cable, but you can absolutely do it with waves. If you had maybe like a USB MADI interface or something like that, you'd be able to use the MADI card. It doesn't really matter. These two things are separate, the control and the audio. So however you're used to getting audio from your console into your computer, that will be fine. I've got a question here that says how to connect the Mac with Avantis for Midi. I connect direct my Avantis card with the Mac with the primary port. Yes, so in this instance, today what I'm doing is I'm connecting one Cat5 cable into my Dante card, and I have the network bridge switched on. If we were doing something where perhaps you didn't have that option, maybe you're using one of the older Dante cards that don't have a bridge, the Waves card, for instance, doesn't have a bridge, or let's say you were doing MADI, with a USB interface, you would run a Cat5 into the network port on the Avantis, something like that. Okay, so let's keep going because there's a few questions coming up that are going to be answered as we go in. So I'll keep going. So we've chosen core audio because we're on a Mac. We've got Dante virtual sound card set up here, and I'm going to go ahead and press start. And I'm going to create tracks. So in this case, I've got 24 tracks. I'm going to press OK. Now I'll give it a second. It's created those 24 tracks. So you can see at the moment that these are called audio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And we can see we've got some audio coming in on 30. And I'll explain what that is in just a few moments. I've deliberately set us up something to trip us up so that we can fix it later. So let's have a little look at my Avantis. There we go. So here's an overhead shot of my Avantis. I've got some audio coming in. Now, this audio is being fed from the S-Link port. I've actually got a little SQ under the desk here that's just supplying audio as if it was coming in through a GX4816 or something like that into the S-Link port. And I've got some scenes set up, and those scenes do a few different things like turn mutes on and off. And I've got some channel names. Now, there's some other things we need to do to get set up with LiveTrax. We need to make sure we're on the right Midi channel. So I'm going to do that by pressing Utility. I'm going to go to Midi at the top. And by default, that Midi channel will actually be on 12 on an Avantis show. And this is to stop you doing anything accidentally. You can leave it on 12, and we can tell tracks that we're using Midi channel 12, or we can put it to 1, or any setting in between. But what we need to do is make a note of that Midi channel. When we come back into tracks, what we need to do is go up to the top. I'm going to go to Window, and we're going to go to Midi connections. And what we can see is how we're routing Midi in and out of LiveTrax. So we've got hardware at the left, so that's the physical inputs and outputs. So we can see Midi control 1, that's the A&H Midi driver. And at the bottom, we've got LiveTrax. So we're routing Midi control 1 into the A&H receive, MMC in, that's Midi control there, and scene in. And if we do it the other way around, we look at LiveTrax out, we look to hardware, we're routing Midi control 1, we're just sending the Allen&Heath send. We're not currently sending MMC or scene out. And we'll come back to what those are and what those mean in a minute. If we go into our settings here, we're going to go into control surfaces and Allen&Heath, show protocol settings. We'll give it a moment. So what we have on this screen, we are choosing our incoming and outgoing Midi. We're choosing our device type, which is Avantis and dLive. That's one device. And we've got some options here. So we've got base Midi channel. That's what I was talking about here on this. Oh, I'm using the wrong mouse. That's what I was talking about here on this screen. We've got Midi channel 1 to 5. So I'm choosing 1 as the starting channel in this screen. And there's some options here. Accept channel names for mixer. So this means that every time we change a channel name on the mixer, those channel names will be reflected in LiveTrax. What we can do at the moment, all those channels are already named on my Avantis. So what I can do is a quick sync. I can press request all channel names from the mixer. So I'm going to press this, and you'll see the channel names on the left. If I've done everything right, there we go. So they've updated from the channel names on my Avantis. Let's see if I can get this into a position where you can see more than one at the same time. If I do something like this, hopefully the resolution is just about good enough. If you look, you've got kick in or KKI in number 1 there on the top left of my bottom right-hand screen. So if I go ahead and change on my Avantis, my kick in channel, I'll try and give this a really obvious name so you can see the name change. I'll give it all O's or something. Press apply. I'm looking at the wrong screen. I'm trying to type and look at screens at the same time. What we should notice is that channel update in LiveTrax, although it actually hasn't, which probably means I've done something wrong. So let's have a little look. Let's go for this view again. There we go. That's the one where you can see the most things. So it could well be that it's just because I've got everything open. If I try and do that again, let's apply. No. Okay, we'll come back to that one. So let's have a little look at some of the other functionality. So how to set up Avantis to send audio to LiveTrax. Now, in this instance, I'm going to be using Dante controller. So I've got my Dante virtual sound card set up here, and I've got that set up in 32 by 32 mode. And if I type in controller for Dante controller, now we've got other documentation, we've got other videos up on how to do Dante patching and things like that. So I'm going to try and not get too in depth in this, but I'm just going to show you what I've done, how I've got it configured. We can always do another video that's specific to Dante patching and things like that in the future if we want to. So I've got my two devices. Allen&Heath here is the card that's in my Avantis. And if I have a look at my receive tab, we can see the first 24 here are connected to my MacBook, and vice versa. If I have a look at my MacBook, those are connected there. And those are being routed from the Avantis, which means they should be all appearing in Trax Live. Now, if I have a look at my Avantis, at the moment, what I've got it set up with is virtual soundcheck. So at the moment, I'm using virtual soundcheck, and virtual soundcheck is currently switched off. There are a number of ways to send audio in Avantis and dLive when doing this kind of thing. So we're going to have a look at the first one, which is using virtual soundcheck. So virtual soundcheck is a mode that allows you to temporarily change the input-output patch of your console. So I've got my Dante card in IO port 1. And if I put this up, something like that, and press record send, you'll put it on my second page. Press record send, you'll see, press continue, that all my meters have started showing in LiveTrax. And that's one of the really wonderful features about LiveTrax is you have those meters up there all the time so you can see what channels have got audio coming in on them. But there's a little bit of something that some people fall into here, right? And it's particularly prevalent with people that are using things like Waves for external plugins. If I bring my Avantis up, you'll notice that my Vocal 1 channel has currently got no audio on it. If I turn virtual soundcheck off, you'll see my first vocal channel's got audio on it again. What's going on here? Well, one of the things that people often mess up on when doing this kind of thing, particularly if you're using plugins and recording at the same time, is using channels twice. So some people will set up all of their sends for virtual soundcheck to be, let's say you've got 32 channels of audio to be 1 to 32, and then if they've got plugins on channels 24, they'll try and reuse number 24 to do a plugin as well. And that's fine when virtual soundcheck's not enabled, but as soon as we go to press record send and press OK, suddenly those channels are taken over. So in this instance, what I've done is I've used number 30. I've used socket 30 on vocal 1 as my insert, as my send and return. We can have a look at how that's set up here. What do I want to do here? I want to go processing. I want to go insert A. So you can see here, because we're in virtual soundcheck, it knows that something's wrong and I've got that X that's appeared on socket 30. So that's why it's really important when we're doing virtual soundcheck to make sure that we scope just to the number of channels that we're using. So in this case, I'm using 24, which means that all of the channels above 24 are available to do plugins on if we want to. So if I go ahead and press record send now, because I've scoped it to 24, channel 22 with vocal 1 is still happily working away. So just a little aside before we went too far, really important when setting up virtual soundcheck that you're really aware of what your scope is and you're really aware of what channels you're using for what. So we've correctly now set up our record send. I'm going to bring Trax back up. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and press record. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to record arm our channels. So I'm going to press record arm here. And you can see all of those channels have lit up. And I can press record at the top. And press play, I think. And we can now see that we are happily recording multi-track audio into LiveTrax. Now, what's cool about LiveTrax over other DAWs that you might have used is LiveTrax is actually able to record either as a WAV file, completely uncompressed PCM audio, or it can record directly to FLAC. Now, FLAC is a lossless. That means that when you play it back, you get everything that was originally there. You don't lose anything by compressing it. It's a lossless compression format, but it does mean that you can get an awful lot more audio on your hard drive before running out of space. So that's just like one really, really nice feature is I'm recording directly to 24-bit FLAC in this instance. Cool. So mute that. So we're doing a bit of recording here, but there are other functions that we get with LiveTrax as well. So if I go back to in fact, you can see, if I go ahead and start recalling scenes on the Avantis, what you should see in LiveTrax are these little markers being put in. And these little markers just reflect each program change. So you can see where you've made scene changes to go along with your recording. So if I stop that recording now, for instance, I can see them at the top. I can go ahead and click on them, put the cursor on that scene. At the moment, nothing on my console is changing. If I play this back, we're just playing back the audio, right? But if I stop it, one of the things we can set up is to have tracks live tracks. That's going to become difficult. We can have LiveTrax send program changes back to the console. So if I go up to Midi connections here, so we've got LiveTrax MISC, and we've got hardware. And what we can do is we can send our scene change out to MIDI control 1, to the dLive MIDI control. So if I go ahead and close my MIDI connection manager now, I could turn off record as well. What I can do is go ahead, and as hopefully you can see some changes going on there, as it goes over each of the scenes, I've got my faders moving on my Avantis. In a second, you'll see the mutes come on as it hits the last scene. There we go. So you can actually use it to automate in reverse as well. And if you want to go ahead and say, virtual soundcheck a particular song, we go ahead and go into a specific scene. It will recall that scene as you play it. So we've talked a little bit about how to get audio into LiveTrax. So let's talk about how to get audio out of LiveTrax. So at the moment on my Avantis, I'm in record send mode still. And the audio you can see at the bottom, that's audio coming into the S-Link port. If I go ahead and touch virtual soundcheck, what will happen now is it's sourcing the audio for all of those input channels from the Dante card. And the Dante card is being sourced from LiveTrax. So if I go back to the start here and press play, by default, what we should have, and yes, I can see some meters flashing there, is it should just play audios directly back to your console. So you can use this for virtual soundcheck, you can use this for tracking a show, all sorts of things. So we're going to go and have a look at some of the other functionality. Just have a look in the chat to see if there are any specific questions. Okay, so one of the questions is, can you get the names of other things like groups or auxes automatically? At the moment, no, this is just input channels. So it will just get one-to-one input channels from your input channel patch list. But any interesting features like that, we can always feed them back to Harrison, and who knows what might happen in the future. Someone's asking about SMTP and other timecode integration functions. It does have the ability to both generate and follow timecode. It's not something I'm going to go into in this particular stream because it's not really Allen&Heath specific, but yes, absolutely, it will follow them. So you could, for instance, have all of your scene changes in LiveTrax, have LiveTrax follow timecode, and basically use the timecode to trigger scene changes on your dLive or Avantis if you want to. Any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Okay, cool. So let's keep going for a minute then, as I can't see any other questions coming in. So there's some other functionality that's really interesting here. Let me go ahead and put this back to the start. So it also has support for MMC. So this is MIDI control, essentially. So if I was to go ahead and go into utility and have a look at my MIDI controls on my Avantis, I can use these to control LiveTrax. So if I put my playhead in the middle so you can see and go ahead and press play, we can see that, press play, he says. We can see that the playhead starts moving in LiveTrax. And equally, if I stop it, I'll need to record arm from my computer. In fact, let's delete everything, start from scratch and go back to the start. If I now record arm and press record, I think I have to press, no, I don't have to press play. I can actually start the recording, stop the recording, etc. from my Avantis. This works on Avantis dLive. I believe it works on SQ and Q as well. It'd be something you could follow up with Keith I think. Yeah, so MMC control as well. You can do super clever things like add the hex strings for MMC commands into scenes so that when you recall specific scenes, it starts recording, stops recording, that kind of thing. Finding a use for those buttons. They have had some other uses, but I think this is a pretty good one. So I go ahead and stop my recording for a second. There we go. And you can do all sorts of remote control just like that. Oh, thanks. Keith jumped in to confirm that it does also work with Q and SQ. I thought it did, but I was a bit scared of lying to you. So what other functionality is worth looking at? Well, you can do some more complex patching. It's worth noting that the track names are pulled from the first track in input channel order. So if input channel 1 on your dLive or Avantis is not routed to channel 1 on LiveTrax, so those two things will not be synced, and you'll want to turn the name integration off. But if you do need to do something more complex, what we can do, or let's say actually that you had a 128 channel waves card or 128 channel Dante card, and you needed to do your record channels on Dante channels, say 34 upwards, because you wanted to use 1 to 33 for your insets. That's totally fine. What we do is we go to Window, we go to Audio Connections, and we have this patching page. So what we can do is take, it says hardware. Hardware is essentially the audio coming into your computer. So whether that's a virtual sound card from Dante, whether it's QREC from Waves, or a USB interface for Midi or something like that. That's what this is on the left-hand side. This is the audio device that you've selected in Audio Midi Setup up here. And at the bottom, these are your tracks. So if you wanted it to be one-to-one, that's great. That's how it comes as default. But let's say that actually you needed to repatch something a little bit different. We could do a line just like that, and we can repatch inputs 24 in to our tracks if we wanted to. So there's quite a lot of advanced functionality built right into the system. That means you can patch your way around all sorts of complex setups that you might have. But what else do we have that's maybe a little bit more simple? Well, so there's a couple of different functions that you've got right in the software. You can use the mixer function to do really simple like stereo mix downs. Maybe you just want to really quickly listen back to something you've just recorded to see if you can work out what channel maybe some cracking and popping was on or something like that. Then you can absolutely do that. What you do is you bring up your faders down here, you press stereo out, and that will now mix down your multi-track to a left and a right. You don't have like full advanced DAW processing. You can't put any effects on or anything like that. That's not really what LiveTrax is for. LiveTrax is really to replace a tape machine. It's for tracking, it's for recording, and you would take your recording and you would mix it down in something else if you were going to mix your recording down. But if you just want to record for virtual soundcheck and do playback for virtual soundcheck, multi-track in, multi-track out, it's really, really, really powerful. It's a really good bit of kit. So we've got some other functions up here. We've got auto return. So let's say I could really have done with recording some more audio, but let's say that we have a range here and we want to play. With auto return on, when I stop, it'll just snap back to wherever you started from. So if you want to keep running the start of a song, you can absolutely do that. Same with follow range. When you've made a range like this, you can go ahead and press the loop button at the top here. I think it doesn't like it because I've got everything record arms still potentially. No, not sure why that's doing that. Let's try that again. Try and make a new one. Well, when you have created a range, you can loop any of your audio around like that as well. Is it full 96K recording? Yes, really good question. So if we go ahead into our setup, I believe you can actually do quite a lot more than 96. It's just that I've got it set up in 48K here and with Dante Virtual Sound Card. If I was to stop my recording session and pick perhaps the built-in. What does the built-in go to on here? I think because I've started the project in 48K, it may not like it. Let's cancel this and start a new project. So if I was to create a session from scratch, discard, don't need any of this, delete the session, start a new recording session. Let's try the built-in. What options is it going to give me? I'm fairly sure it's whatever your core audio device supports. I'm pretty sure that it will record it, but it can certainly record at full 96K. Does LiveTrax get audio? LiveTrax get audio from console via I/O card? Yes, it does. I saw somebody else whilst I was talking start talking about USB interfacing into Avantis. I've mentioned USB interfaces only in the context of Midi. You can also do it with Dante, but there is no direct USB into Avantis or dLive. You would need some sort of I/O card. The most popular two realistically are going to be Midi, Dante, or Waves, with the most popular three. Sorry. I think a lot of people on this call will be thinking about using Dante. I'm certainly using Dante here. Ben says, hi, Jack, you must right-click on that range and choose set loop. Oh, you're so right, Ben. Thank you for catching that. That was very kind of you to jump in there. So if we go back to a new session, going to go to a recording session. So I've got Dante, auto start, on, start, yes, go. I'm going to create 24 tracks with record arm on. Give it a moment to create the tracks. Let's record some audio. We'll give it a minute just to get some audio in. Of course, I've turned virtual sound check off at this point, so that's not very helpful. So we'll get some audio recorded. Give that a second. That's enough for the demo. Stop that. So I'm going to create a range. I'm going to right click, loop range. There we go. And I can enable the loop and play it back. Let's just So as you see, that's now happily looping. I think that's enabled. Let's see if it carries on. Nope. Let's try that again. There we go. So that'll happily loop there. If you wanted to, for instance, keep doing a singular song over and over or something like that. Is it possible to record audio files on LiveTrax with timecode stamp when receiving timecode from an external device? Yes, you can absolutely record timecode and have it follow timecode. So that all the timecode settings are based in the sync source. So it will follow MIDI timecode, also follow LTC, and you can go ahead and source that from whichever channel it is that has your LTC or MTC coming in. Yeah, absolutely. So any other questions that anyone would like me to go through whilst we are all here together? So I'm more than happy to go through anything else that anyone would like to see. Here says, Jack, which IP address is correct for Avantis? So it entirely depends on how you have your Avantis set up. So by default, it's 192.168.1.80. So .80 is the default Avantis IP address. But if we were to have a little look on Avantis here, utility, nope, setup, config, network. There we go. So you can see my network settings for Avantis here. These are all the default ones. So this is on 192.168.1.80, and that is the address that you'd put in. It should just appear in MIDI control from the drop-down. So if we have a look at MIDI control here, go to show preferences. I'm going to disconnect temporarily. Custom, you can type an IP address in, but my Avantis here is called Solo. That is the name it has in the software. Yours may be called Avantis, it may be called something else, but it should appear in the list if you have a reasonably standard network setup. And then you can press tick and off you go. Can you MIDI control virtual faders? Something for another time, I think. So there are MIDI faders available on dLive, and there is a limited amount sort of Mackie UE control of external DAWs. So yes and no. It's not particularly how it's designed to interact with one another, but yes, in a nutshell. Jonathan says, do you lose half your track count at 96K? So there's sort of like what's the best way of putting it? No is the short answer. No, you don't lose half your track count at 96K. It's quite specific to Dante Virtual Sound Card. So Dante Virtual Sound Card supports 64 channels at 48K or 32 channels at 96K. But that's really got nothing to do with LiveTrax. That's sort of a completely separate thing. That question about time codes now been asked 3 times. I'm not sure if you want me to answer in a different way or for live hosts, you only scene switch. For example, the band leader starts a song and I will switch a scene exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thanks for jumping in on that, Ben. So Ben, just for everyone's information, because we're streaming on multiple platforms, there's a question about how the timecode stamp recording works that was asked on Facebook. And Ben has replied on Facebook, so other people won't have seen. He says he believes both the WAV file and the FLAC files will put the SMTP timestamp in the file header corresponding to the timecode location of when the recording file starts. But he does warn that you should test whether it works for your particular workflow. So you should get the timecode stamp for this at the start of the file. Cool. Alrighty then. Well, unless anyone's got any other specific questions or anything they would like me to go through in particular, we might start to think about bringing this to a close. But the main things to know are the LiveTrax is reasonably easy to use, even if I haven't necessarily made that super clear with my use of the software. And there's a number of really interesting A&H specific integrations. So we can go ahead and pull channel names in from the console, which is really, really useful. We can do MMC control where we can start to record, stop, and play from the console. And we also have those scenes that appear at the top, and they also appear on the right-hand side. In fact, if I just keep recording, we'll record arm again and play. We'll just record a little bit more audio in. If I go ahead and recall some of those scenes again, you can see my scenes list there on the right-hand side of the Avantis. But I have disconnected my Midi, which I'll now need to reconnect again. So if I reconnect my Midi and we go ahead into LiveTrax and check my audio Midi setup. No, going to set my A&H control surfaces, Allen&Heath, show protocol settings. Yes. Check it's working by requesting the channel names. Let's see if I'm getting scene control then. Let's go ahead and make sure it's patched in Midi connections. So I've got Midi control 1 scene out and scene in, close U, start recording, try and recall some scenes. So what you end up with when you have these scene markers at the top, I'll just let it get to the end so I'm not putting them one over the top of each other. You not only get the scene marker at the top, but you can also on the right-hand side see the scene number along with the duration. And what it means is that when we want to come back to play, there we go, that'll do for now. Let's unrecord arm. I can go ahead and jump to a specific scene, which is probably a specific song, just by touching here on the right, which is super handy. James says, I've got dLive connected to the laptop with Dante, no issue. Open MIDI control and it won't connect. I've connected KL from console to Dante also. Okay, so things to think about if you have connected and you've got Dante audio running. Oh, there we go. If you've got Dante audio running, IP address range. Are you on the same IP address range? So Dante by default is usually linked local. Avantis and dLive are not linked local by default. They are 192.168.1. something. So I guess the first thing to do would be to check that it's all in the same IP address range. From the same laptop, a really good diagnostic would be to see if you can connect dLive Director and see if Director is able to connect. If Director is able to connect, then Midi control should be able to connect. You could try typing the IP address of the mix rack in manually to see if that helps. There's a few different things you could try. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. If anyone does have any questions after the stream, they are most welcome to get in contact with us by going to support.allen-heath.com. That would be for anything that is specific to the use of A&H consoles with LiveTrax. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to reach out to Harrison's support team for anything that is more specific to LiveTrax. Sorry, just saw some more questions come through. Nathan's asking about the transport controls. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to scroll back a little bit, we went through the transport controls a little bit earlier. This will all be available to watch again at your leisure as soon as it finishes. Okay, thanks ever so much for joining.